Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr. Welcome to another episode of Manspeak. And this is a special Solstice edition. It's the 22nd of December here I'm actually at Uluru in Central Australia. And the solstice was 4 hours ago at 7:17 this morning. And now I've come back to town to do this recording because at least I'm guaranteed internet. So sorry, there's no views of the rock. And as it is, it's actually raining and pretty cold. I'm glad that I brought a jacket because we are in the middle of summer here. But obviously they're playing around with the weather because I'm here for 10 days total. I got 2 days to go. We've already had a lot of rain. The weather forecast showed that the rest of the week, the time here was going to be sunny, and now it's come over mega cloudy and rainy again with a lot more forecast. So if you're in the Northern Territory, we've heard that you're going to get hit really hard. Anyway, this is pretty exciting to do this on location. And our special guest today is the wonderful Sacha Stone. He's over there in Mexico at the New Earth Sanctuary, where he's doing amazing things, bringing heaven to planet Earth. If you don't know Sacha, he's a brilliant architect, geometer, poet, so many things. Just check out his website and you'll see all the amazing things that he's actually doing, walking the talk, not just speaking about, amazing technologies that are all coming in to create our heaven on earth. Now, today's topic that Sacha has chosen is the trial of separation. And he adds, understanding this narrative is essential if we are to self-actualize and then resurrect both individually as well as collectively as a species. It's a vast theme, but one which every single human is constantly embattled with. So really looking forward to chatting with Sacha about this. I hope the connection is loud and strong and that I can bring in the very powerful energies from Uluru. And again, happy solstice, everyone. Enjoy. Hello, Sacha. How are you over there in Mexico?
Very, very happy to be here in the sunshine and having left Europe and the Mediterranean in the last few days. So happy to be here. Thank you. Nice to see you.
You too. Happy solstice.
Indeed. Back to you.
I thought I'd start. I've let people know the theme of the show in the introduction, but I thought I'd start with reading your latest poem, and that'll give us a lovely introduction into the theme, and maybe you'll be able to expand from there. Is that okay?
Surely.
Okay. And so before us dimly rose the dawn of our remorse, a stricken path of jagged stone on love's imperfect course, where jealousy's unbridled rage impales the loving heart, rendering which heaven sent 10,000 years apart, and thus consigns to future times for other lives instead, a sadder story yet foretold, where death betroths the dead. And who remains the champion, and who remains the bride, if all remains are mute refrains of all the love that died? Beautiful.
Sounds like the trial of separation to me.
Would you like to expand on that poem, Sacha?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, like all the poems that I write, it's really configured around what I just joked about, the trial of separation, because the trial of separation, of course, describes the human condition, or the mortal condition for sure, and our sort of proverbial or apocryphal fall from grace. And all that that engenders, the splintered soul that separates from source and then moves into the ethers and surfs the trajectory of karma and dharma and reincarnation and so on, and all that happens in between, you know, in an incarnation in this world. What occurs, you know? Well, there's a separation from the typhonic state of consciousness in the first instance, as we're being birthed through the mother's womb into the light of temporal light of the 3D world, and we come into this world blinking, innocent, and recently departed from the typhonic consciousness, from the union of Alpha Omega. And then the journey of suffrage and of pain and of the separation begins again. And we move into our infancy, and all the various delights and the horrors of this temporal existence kick in, and pain, and physical pain and psychological pain. And then, of course, when we move, emotional pain and the traumas that seem to follow us on the soul's journey. So not just feeling the pain of this world, but we all also get triggered by the events and the circumstances and the relationships in this world, act as triggers and catalysts to awaken old trauma patterns and scars and wounds that we carry from previous incarnations, all the way back to the separation of soul from source in the great fall, so to speak. So for me to dwell on that that subject is really just taking a responsible aspect and wanting to alchemize that theme which we carry, the wound that we carry, the scar that we carry, and the process and the business of alchemizing that in the now, which is where, for me, the perfect geometry of now kicks into it, because ultimately we're forced to move into coherence with our immanent divine flame, because that's the only place or vector or quanta wherein we move back into a state of grace, and thereby the trial of separation is no longer something which is traumatizing us. So it's the realm of duality of this world is perfect in all of its suffrage, in all of its pain, because it creates, again, the contrast or the traction against which we define our Atman, our Alpha Omega presence, full aspect of soul in this world whilst we're alive in the flesh. And so it's an important theme. And that poem, I'm just trying to call it up in front of me so that I can maybe reference it. Just give me one moment. There we go. I found it, so I can reference it there. And it says, for stone. Well, that describes every single love affair. That describes every single marriage, every single betrothment in the history of the world, human to human, male to female. I guess that's not very politically correct nowadays. I should be not be so. So animals, well, separation from, you know, loving a creature can also hurt like hell. But it's not just relationship with between people and people. It's also relationship between you and circumstance, between you and, I'll give you an example. When we grow up and we're no longer a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, being cosseted in the kind of familial embrace of our families, and feeling that wonderful kind of warmth of we're being looked after. We're not out there having to fight to put the food on the table. We've got grandparents and parents and uncles and aunts and noble adults out there who are fighting the fight, and all we need to do is play and be good and do what we're told, you know. And there's a certain comfort in that, in reflecting on your childhood and missing it. So as we depart childhood, oftentimes we look back and we miss the hell out of it. I do, as a middle-aged man. I look back and I remember that beautiful quasi-typhonic state when everything was being taken care of, you know, and we weren't out there on the front line having to fight life's battles. So it's missing, not just, and looking back with a remorse, not just on relationships, but also on circumstances in our lives. An old person who's no longer able to enjoy lovemaking, for instance, or the physical orgasm, no longer kindled with those fires, but can still feel saddened at the loss of that vitality, of that vigor. And it can be deep. It can be very deep. The missing of the comfort of and the companionship of friends who have died, and family members who have died. Of course, the older we get, the more familiar we are forced to become with that process of separation. So that's what I talk about. And so before us dimly arises the dawn of our remorse. That's to say every day, because the remorse bit is, could I have done better? Could I have loved more sharply, more keenly? Could I have been more present in that relationship? That's why I talk about it being a stricken path of jagged stone on love's imperfect course, because love is always imperfect, and yet love is the very thing that is demanding perfection of us. It's the thing that is challenging us to our perfection, especially when we suffer from unrequited love. And most of us do. Most of us don't get to love the object of our desire truly. Some of us do, but mostly we don't. Mostly we have to let go of the object of our desire at some point. And that can burn like hell and hurt like hell. But that jagged path on love's imperfect course is the very thing that moves us into becoming greater than we are. And then the next line was where jealousy's unbridled rage impales the loving heart, rendering which heaven sent 10,000 miles apart. Well, that speaks to how pridefulness and indeed jealousy, there's no separation between jealousy and pride. They're the same thing. But oftentimes what destroys relationships, friends as well as lovers, as well as partners in life, is when we project our own fears at the one that we love, because the one that we love is so filled with promise, and the object that we desire promises us such salvation and such perfection and such bliss that we're afraid to embrace it because of what it might feel like if it were to leave, if we were to lose it, if it were to walk out the door. And so rather than have the courage to embrace it fully and see where that journey takes us, oftentimes we make the mistake of destroying it rather than allowing it the possibility of destroying us. That's a crime. And it's one that we are all responsible for variously in this great and grave odyssey of human love. And we need to, when I talk about the unbridled jealousy or anger or projectionism that impales the loving heart, the true heart, it's how we destroy the ones who are truly loving us, oftentimes, not always, oftentimes. Rendering which heaven sent 10,000 years apart. Speaking there about the fact that we're going to have to revisit this relationship in the next lifetime or one later, because you can't, if you have not dealt with that relationship fully, by embracing it fully, alpha, omega, then it will revisit you in a future timeline or trajectory of soul. There's no question about that. We have to resolve every single relationship to the maximum fully by giving ourselves fully to it. That is the ultimate sacrifice, is I'm going to love you and I'm going to put everything into this, and I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to filter it. I'm going to be fully present and in it, and come what may. And that's really ultimately where we have to take the journey of love, into full unbridled immersion in the now and unfiltered love, and thus consigns to future times for other lives instead, a sadder story yet foretold, where death betroths the dead. I'm speaking just about the laws of karma and reincarnation, and we must address it in the living now, or we'll be forced to die unrequited, and then have to again, the dead will have to betroth the dead. I'll have to meet you again in another lifetime, and we'll have to again come together, hopefully the next time, not in a state of fearfulness or projectionism or jealousy or all of that stuff, that shadow boxing bullshit that we pollute and contaminate our relationships with. And then and who remains the champion, and who remains the bride, if all remains are mute refrains of all the love that's died? Well, that's just speaking to the fact that there are no winners when we don't engage love fully. If we try to edit people out of our lives because we're afraid of the love, we're afraid of what might happen, or we don't believe that this will work, or this is too good to be true, and we project our fears onto the other, we are the ones consigning it to the grave, and all that remains are the deaf refrains, the song, the echo, the distant echo of all the love that has died. Meaning to say, don't do that. Don't go there, because why consign the love to a future engagement? Why not just be fully in love in the now, and come what may, come what may. This is true courage, and this for me is the noble path, is to give oneself fully. I see that even earlier today, looking at some Facebook memes and Instagram memes going around, as you see them, little mottos and sayings that seem to correspond to the mood of the time. And some of these I was seeing today with beautiful younger women, in the main, putting up a meme talking about how, oh, if it doesn't feel right, leave, walk away. If it doesn't feel absolutely right, hit the switch and walk out the door. You know, you're too good for this. And this is such a diabolical attitude toward relationship. Listen, you're going to feel good sometimes about it, and you're going to feel not so good about it sometimes. But that doesn't mean you hit the light switch. That doesn't mean you edit people and you give him the boot or give her the boot because you didn't have a great day or you didn't have a great week. You know, that is not love. That is so far from engaging the spirit and the flame of love, to be so prepared in the first instant of feeling some hurt, which is often just a projection from you, to, you know, walk out the door. And how many relationships do that? I would suggest 8 or 9 out of 10 relationships end because of pridefulness and jealousy. Again, they're the same quanta, and they're both very, very destructive to the flame of love. And it's a theme in my life which never ends, and I'm constantly aware of that theme playing out in friendships, playing out in with colleagues, with people I love and trust. And I determined a long time ago to trust everyone absolutely. and to offer the keys to my castle to every soul who comes in and crosses the threshold. And it's something which has caused unmitigated pain to me, and unmitigated disappointment, constant disappointment. But I know that I'm right in continuing to extend that rose or that flower or that key to everyone. And I'm not just talking about lovers here. I'm talking about humans, people. I trust everyone who comes in and crosses the threshold. That raises a whole bunch of questions as well, about how present am I being, or are we being, in that first moment of engagement with someone, when you first meet someone. And again, it could be a job interview. It could be a meeting of the local, town hall. It could be meeting your doctor or your dentist for the first time. It could be bumping into someone in a bar. It could be, across a nightclub floor dimly, with too much alcohol. It could be you in the brazen light of day being struck with a thunderbolt of love, falling instantly in love with someone. The point I'm trying to make is, in that first instant of exchanging of fire in the eyes, the question is, are you present in that exchange? Are you absolutely present? Because if you are, and if you were, you would learn every single thing that you will ever need to know about that individual, because there is a packet of information that is transferred through the fire in the eyes in the first nanosecond of meeting every single soul that you meet. But it only depends on your own capacity to be in a state of witness, in timelessness, in the now, that you're able to receive that packet of information. And incidentally, that's the packet of information in that instantaneous exchange of fire in the eyes that gives you the gut instinct: no, I will not get into this car with this stranger. Okay, no, I will not engage relationship with this individual and go back and fuck them tonight if you're drunk in a bar. I know I will not. That's what I'm driving at here. That's the importance of what I'm speaking about. So I'll just wind this up by saying that that's the importance for me about dwelling on the theme of the broken heart, or the theme of betrayal, or the theme of disenchantment with love, or the theme of the trial of separation, is because the more one becomes cognizant of the value of love in the living moment, the more we can pull ourselves into that state of witness where we can absolutely alpha omega see and know and feel everything about someone in the living moment that we meet them.
Beautiful, Sacha. Thank you. How do you envision relationships in 5D, in the new earth? Intimate relationships. How does that play out between, let's say, a woman and a man?
Moving forward as a species, you're asking me to speculate on how relationships are likely to engage between the male and the female, essentially, not exclusively, but moving forward into the emergent new Earth horizon. I might be the perfect person to answer that question. Conversely, I might be the very worst person to answer that question, because I, in the first instance, can only look at relationships as I see and know them and understand them in the pantheon of relationships in my life that I've observed amongst friends and family. And the overwhelming majority of them have been failures, in terms of he and she, of Mr. and Mrs., of mummy and daddy, of boy and girl. Why is that? I don't know. I suspect that it's because most relationships are bonded through fear and not through love. Most of them are bonded through, in the first instance, sexual addiction is normally what glues and bonds relationships between younger people. And that's to do with psychochemistry and to do with physical biochemistry. So there's a whole host of reasons why we're attracted to someone. Certainly, there's also the soul frequency where we are remembering and in someone something that bites us so deeply and rekindles something in our spirits so deeply that we become indelibly drawn to that individual, that we cannot breathe without them, albeit for a period of time. We tend to recover from these things eventually, but I think I'm describing something that we all have felt and experienced in life. How do we evolve as a species into the new Earth horizon, so to speak, into the so-called fifth density engagement? I think we become a lot more grown up, a lot more galactic in our orientation, which is not to be possessive. You want to be with the one you want to be with, but not because it's a cultural expectation or a familial expectation. I think we have to disengage altogether from the familial patterns, which I think are highly toxic in the main. The expectation that your family has of you. Families are bundles of hereditary galactic trauma, mostly. Okay, be clear about that. Family constellations are mostly a clusterfuck of cosmic trauma patterns that, for various reasons, not exclusively, oftentimes intertwined with a tremendous amount of love as well, and connection at the soul level. And there are soul covenants there, always. They are based on soul covenant. But the point I'm making is that this idea that blood is thicker than water is bullshit, ultimately. It is true the more close we are to our base animal instinct and nature, but when we get into the true state of grace of Atman, I genuinely regard every child on earth as my child. I do. I've felt this way for many years. I feel like I'm responsible for every single 2-year-old on the face of the earth and every 7-year-old on the face of the earth. Fact. I also feel that every old woman, and by old, I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound reductive, but by old, I'm talking about women. My favorite human being is the woman who enters the crone state, which is, I guess, late 60s into the mid 70s onward. That to me is the most powerful being in this world. So women who are in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s are the creatures that I fall in love with most deeply, for a whole host of reasons, but not obviously not for material reasons, but at the frequency level, and in terms of the wisdom flame, and in terms of the alchemized human heart, it's the crone woman that I love most, and followed by the feminized patriarch, old men in their late 60s or 70s or 80s who have also alchemized their hearts and become the feminized patriarch. This is such a powerful, powerful archetype. And I love these beings and these creatures because I know what incredible hard work it takes at the soul level to alchemize hearts like that. And then we get into the other demographics of people, the warrior class of man, which I love, and beautiful goddesses whom I love. Obviously, I'm crazy about women. Who's not? Children, don't even start me there. Any creature under the age of 7, normally, I become incredibly infatuated with the spirit. Kids between the age of 7 and 14 are normally motherfuckers, every last one of them, and really difficult to contain. But there's a beautiful spirit there, untrammeled, unbridled spirit of defiance, and you've just got to love that. So I've just described the human family, and that's the creature. It's the human. It's the good human that is a magnificent creature. Where do relationships go in the fifth density, so to speak, in the emergent new Earth horizon? Human to human, I think they become very grown up at the galactic level. I think we start to become as I am becoming, we start to recognize the beauty in each of the demographics, and we start to recognize that the union and the communion of the masculine and the feminine archetype within me is the true betrothment, is the true marriage. That I must become the feminized, not matriarch, but I must become the feminized male patriarch. I must create a perfect fusion of the hemispheres in order to become an actualized human being. And then that must fractate into life and how I carry relationships forward. If people talk about twin flames, people talk about, again, the only argument I can use, and I think I probably even raised it in a conversation with you, Gemma, because we have these heartful conversations together. I remind people before they pledge their eternal love to the next twin flame bullshit that they're projecting into this veil of tears. I remind them that they've lived for hundreds, if not thousands of lifetimes. And in almost every single lifetime before, they've also pledged their eternal love to an eternal flame or to an eternal twin flame. And so you have to start to grow up. That's why I've twice used the term, we have to become grown up. I think we'll become grown up in the galactical sense. I hope so. I hope we recognize that you are my twin flame, Gemma. You are my eternal beloved and my immortal beloved. And we must begin to accede and ultimately alchemize our aspect into knowing, not just seeing or believing or feeling or sensing, but into knowing that we are all absolutely undivided, that there was never any separation between us, that the Gemma star creature that is manifest and embodying and enacting in this temporal realm is doing so as an aspect of me. You're doing me in you, and I'm doing you in me. And the more we can recognize that beauty in one another and that noble journey in each other, the more quantum we will become in our aspect toward all living beings. And that's what I mean by becoming grown up. I don't want to continue this fetid nonsense of narrowing the lens of one's so-called love toward the object, one individual, and imagining that pledging one's eternal flame to that individual is real. It's not real. It's a delightful folly that can intoxicate you with the fever of human love, but that is not the ultimate expression of love. So it's a loaded question you ask me. I see a realm emerging in the field of expression, wherein and whereupon we ultimately all begin to reconfigure our individuated aspect of being as just a perfect refraction and fractal of all aspects of God, and see no shadow and no separation. I'm such an absolutist in this, and that's because I have a very keen typhonic memory and consciousness of I have a great typhonic remembrance of what went before this world for me. But I know that to be true for all of us, put it that way. Sorry for sounding so enigmatic in the answer.
No, I love it. I just love the flow of this. Sacha, would you like to expand on that memory that you just spoke of, the typhonic memory, when we weren't separated?
You know, one can try to do these things, but it's not. It's a bit ignoble, and the reason being that I long understood through my own intellectual gymnastics that it becomes a form of hubris or folly to try to put into words the ineffable. And that's not a get out clause, incidentally. I'm being as gracious as I can about the answer. There are certain things that are ineffable for a reason, that which cannot be spoken of, because the words, as I've said 1,000 times in the last 10, 15 years, in 1,000 interviews and media drops, words are ultimately a fraud. I'm committing fraud by speaking to you, and you're committing fraud in speaking to me. Why do I use such absolute language? Because it's true, because the murmurings and the hums and the screeches and the squawks that come out of us as words, they're beautiful in a sense, but they betray the fact that we have fully activated the trial of separation. And when we reconfigure the bad geometry of reality into the immanent state of grace, or reconfigure it with typhonic consciousness, we get into full empathic wave interaction and thereby telepathic communication. And it's the telepathic communication or the empathic wave entanglement that is absolute language. It doesn't need words or squawks or grunts, because the squawks and the grunts are always shrouded in the language of ego and of pain and of trauma. So we exchange deceptions with one another, imagining that we're speaking the truth, but we're not. We're simply, in a sense, creating white noise and filling up the continuum of so-called time space. And it's wasteful. I would far rather the world all went into a universal covenant of silence, certainly for 1 day a week, but it would be great if it was 6 days a week, because we would very, very quickly flame the heart of psionic connection, typhonic consciousness, telepathy. And that means there are no further deceptions and lies, because that which is self-revealing, self-existent to one another. That for me is the state of true communion and grace that I crave and that I miss. I'm trying to describe to you my previous incarnation, and yours, incidentally, which is in that typhonic state of grace, and not needing to formulate words to try to buy favors or try to convince one another of our thoughts. And what are our thoughts? They are caged emotions. They are unresolved emotions in that sense. And they're, I'm not clever enough to continue along this particular line of inquiry.
Thank you for trying. It's beautiful. Thank you. Sacha, I'm interested in, I know that you touched on this topic being important for humanity and for them to embrace their shadow work around this. And I think from what I've consider to be important on this subject is the balance between freedom and love. And I see freedom as being the masculine energy and priority, and love as being the feminine priority and energy. So how does one balance freedom and love, and what shadow work do people have to do to find this inner union flame with balanced freedom and love?
Well, respectfully, that's a leading question, because you're asking me to expand on your intellectual or philosophical idea, and I don't necessarily hold with it. Although, of course, I understand exactly what you're saying, and you're right in the sort of studied sense. You're absolutely right to describe the feminine as being the love principle, which is the grounded principle in the here and now. Which is the one that absolves and forgives. It's the magneto point, the magnetic point, the magneto point. And the masculine in that sense being the expressive and the electrical force that moves out and goes hunting and, fighting and, providing and all of that bullshit. So yes, freedom and love in that sense. I like the way you've given them a descriptive that's not a usual one, but I still say it's a folly to think in those terms, because we're giving voice again to the perpetual feedback cycle of duality and of this and that, of he and she. And we should rather put our resource and our attention toward recognizing that duality is the very it's the very folly, it's the very Maya, the illusion. And to not even go there and place attention on it, much less discourse on it. We need to see freedom in its truest sense as being absolute love. And we need to know love in its truest quintessence to be absolute freedom. So there is no separation between them, never was. And that's the moral of the story here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was aiming at when I was saying, to balance
Sure.
the two and, the union of the masculine and feminine. But do you feel it's important to go back for people who aren't at that actual stage yet and talk about shadow work and talk about the human journey to get to that point?
Yeah, and we could talk about that, but to some extent we have done. Speaking about karma and dharma and reincarnation and trauma patterns and the entanglement of arcane trauma patterns, and how we are the ones through our addiction to false allegiance to things like family, things like husband and wife, the marriage. The marriage is the all. No, it's not. It's a temporal engagement between two individuals, some very rarely connected at the soul level, truly in alignment and coherence, mostly configured through fear and through sexual addiction and through familial expectations. If you're a Muslim girl in the Punjab or whatever, and you're married at the age of 3.5. So most engagements and relationships are false entanglements, and they're based on trauma. And the familial tradition and the cultural tradition and the religious and theological tradition itself is a trauma model and a trauma cluster and entanglement. And so here we've just got this endless entropic fractal model of dystopia and fear, the absence of love. So that's the danger. How do we disengage from that on the journey toward our own redemption and salvation or absolution? That, of course, is the valid question, and I think which is the essence of what you're asking. But that always comes back down, as you know, with me, to you in the now, in the here and now, and how you engage in the here. I've got a fucking mosquito here in front of me about to nail my eyeball, excuse me. You and me in the here and now, how we engage the flame of pure truth. Always that. Always as simple and as elegant and as timeless as the flame of pure truth. And the degree to which you or I are able, willing, capable, and commensurate with staying in that flame, and if needs be, burn like hell when you first are required to be drawn, when you are drawn into the flame of pure truth. Look, again, let's just look at this, dial it back. Most relationships that fall apart are without having fully configured and engaged are because as the two are falling in love, one party invariably becomes afraid of the reflection that they're seeing in the flame of pure truth, because the flame of pure truth is always a perfect mirror. So if the relationship with the other is something which is actually very coherent and is calling you into muster and drawing you in toward this mirror in order to fulfill a soul covenant, but as you're drawn toward each other, the horror enters the heart of what if it doesn't work out? And oftentimes if someone has a drink or drug problem or addiction issues, that's also exacerbated and causes them to move into fight or flight mode. And so that relationship again is disrupted or put on pause for another lifetime. And again, there's no such thing as time, and it's fine. Everything is perfect in the geometry of now, ultimately. But it can always be more perfect geometry in the more perfect now. And that's the fucking point. And when we get that point of how we can make perfection even more perfect, then we should really all ultimately acknowledge that walking boldly into love, right into that flame and burning, allowing that jealousy to burn away, allow the fear to burn away, allow the misgivings or the speculations to burn away, and still remain in that flame. What are you left with? That's the question. You're left with the very thing that you crave more than any other, which is a perfect revelation and a reflection of self upon self within the flame of this relationship. All relationships offer this salvation. Every single relationship offers that salvation. And then, of course, one moves into supernature if you have the strength and the fortitude to move into that flame, and you then become the empowered one. And your partner may still not be fully conscious and may not have risen to the caliber, but then you can steer the outcome in a state of grace, because you are the one there taking the responsibility to absolve their shadows and their fears and steward them toward the revelation. So it's always a high outcome, if we have the grace and the fortitude and the strength to stand in that flame. And as long as it doesn't turn into a self-abusive cycle. Obviously, if a relationship is an abusive feedback relationship, and you've stood in the flame and you've burnt away all the shadow language that you carry in that equation, that's the point at which you could generally say, okay, well, I love this individual, but I'm damned if I'm going to sustain any more abuse. I've done everything I can, legitimately, truly. I have done everything I can. So that becomes, again, something which one has to adjudicate in the living moment. But I know from experience and from counseling people that most people bolt before they've stood in the flame of pure truth and allowed their own shadow land to become harmonized. That's really the issue. And that's where this great reckoning is, of you always being the Alpha and the Omega, you always, in every moment in your life, having the propensity and the capacity and the power to and that's the noble path. The noble journey is when we are wearing the Christed mantle, because that's where we forgive and forgive and forgive again, and absolve and redeem and forgive again and again and again. And it's a timeless motion. That forgiveness does not have a beginning and an end. Absolution doesn't have a beginning and an end. You don't just absolve once. You have to be in the state of grace to endlessly absolve the other in this world. That's what wearing the Christed mantle is all about. Mm-hmm.
This is fascinating, Sacha. So am I right in...
That was your answer.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, just broke up a little bit. So I hope that you got to finish what you were saying. But it's fascinating, because am I right in saying that if it's not an abusive relationship, that you're saying that the best option for growth and consciousness is to stay in a relationship, even if you're not happy, to work through it? Is that what you're saying?
You're getting me into territory where I'm going to get to a lot of trouble with people, and I'm going to get a lot of hate mail. So I'd rather not go too far down this path. I'm saying that you could do it in one relationship, a monogamous relationship, or you could do it in a polygamous situation. You could conduct the same quanta with multiple partners if you are commensurate with it, if you're able, capable, and willing to. Like I said to you, I've myself in my life, I've expressed polyamory. not in an unbridled way, but I certainly have, because that was my natural predisposition. But I also qualified it by saying that I've grown into becoming more monogamized in my attitude. It's not that I practice it. I'm not practicing with anyone right now, but the point is, I've become more monogamized in my attitude. I don't know if that's to do with the depleted. I don't know what it's to do with. I mean, I'm still alive and, you know, vital and you know, but I think it's just the nature of my life and the fact that that I'm very, very married to the process of what it is that I'm doing in this world at this time, and I'm doing a lot. And so I've kind of monogamized my focus in life, because I don't have the wherewithal as I did 10 years ago, or even 15 or 20 years ago, to conduct this wonderful kind of polyamorous existence of just being, I believe, a responsible polyamorist. I think I always was, because I've genuinely been in love with more than one woman at the same time, and I mean genuinely. I've experienced that, and it's been very challenging in the past, because one's living a kind of quantum mindset in a very minimized and dualistic field of reality, when it doesn't go down too well with most people. And so, you know, I think I probably became somewhat chastened by that period of my life. In any event, getting laid is not my priority in life any longer. It certainly was at one point, but it's not now. So hopefully one day it'll, you know, come back in force. We'll see. We'll see.
I love your honesty.
I'm not really. Well, as I said, we get into territory here where I'll get a lot of hate mail, because you know, there are some certain popular notions out there that I lead this kind of bestial, orgiastic life as a sex cult guru in Bali, which is so far from the truth. But I rather like the idea, so I'm happy about allowing people to think that. But it's so sadly far from the truth. Next question.
Okay. When you when we were talk, well, you know, thinking about the show, you mentioned Plato's cave as a theme towards what you wanted to bring into this show. Is there any more? I didn't know the story, so I looked it up. Is there? Do you feel it's important to talk about that in this show?
You know, it's a theme I think about, because somebody who I you know, very much love, and raised the theme in my life recently, and led me to look at it and to think about the Plato's cave. And it's not something I thought about. And of course, I've studied Plato and the Socratic traditions, and all of that, but I'd not sat with Plato's cave and understanding how that relates to this very process that we've been speaking about love and falling in love and being in love and making war with love, and fighting with the flame of pure truth and the flame of love, which we all variously do. But the Plato's cave becomes a very important metaphor for each of us, I guess, to recognize that we do an awful lot of projectionism. We project our traumas and our fears onto the object that we love. I mean, it's a crime, but we do it. But it's a crime, but we do it. And we hurt one another, and we hurt self, and we hurt the other, and all it leaves is a fucking world of hurt. And which begs the question, why don't you crawl the fuck out of your Plato's cave into the sunlight? And why don't we all stop shadow boxing and stop projecting our fears our misgivings and our own failings onto the other. It's an eternal question. And it's one which we should all be consumed by, because the sooner we, as individuals and as a society, as a culture, as a civilization, the sooner we make peace with this folly of projecting our hurt, causing hurt to others because we ourselves are hurt. It is a crime to hurt others in order to cover or excuse our own hurt, or to project our own hurt. And yet that seems to be what we do. Actually, it's the signature of dystopia. It's the signature of a dystopian reality or culture or civilization, is that we are butchering one another in order to cover up our own scars. We are fleecing and racketeering and profiteering off one another precisely to cover up the guilt that we feel, the shame that we feel of not being enough, which is how the banker and the merchant, the technocrat and the bureaucrat emerge with their petty tyranny and their little dick syndrome, constantly trying to empower themselves because they hold the statute book and they wear the uniform or carry the badge. So that's where little dick syndrome with idiot police and people in costume comes in. So when I talk about the Plato's cave, I'm extrapolating that theme, not just from girl and boy and how we fail at stepping up to love, but how it extrapolates into the lives of every miserable human being trapped in the matrix. So it's an important theme that each of us need to grapple with. Am I going forth in this world causing harm or injury to others because of the unresolved injury or hurt or scars or wounds that I carry? That's the question. And for me, it's a valid question. I've had a number of women in my life who have written me letters accusing me of having done that in relationship for whatever reason. But it was always to do with their jealousy, sexual jealousy, which for me is the most unbridled ugliness that you see in relationships. An understandable one, but it's ugly nonetheless. Jealousy is just venal. It's just devours and desecrates the taproot of anything worthy and beautiful. And people who are consumed with jealousy always justify that shitty stuff to themselves, always. And that's I've had a lifetime experience of dealing with jealous women, and it's ugly by nature, by definition, and by distinction. And yet the pridefulness that comes with it is just as awful. And I say it's a crime. It's a crime to be prideful. It's a crime to be jealous, because that describes an unresolved heart, making condemnations or judgments of the other. So that's why for me it's a theme and a subject that's worthy of observation or of evaluation. But each of us have to, and I've looked at myself, and for 1,000 nights with cold night sweats, feeling unloved or unrequited, or and had to really sit with this stuff and look at it. I'm very satisfied having done that audit on a constant basis and a continuous basis with myself. I'm quite confident in myself that I've managed to resolve most, if not all, of the scar tissue, the wounds that I have carried in life, sufficient that I don't project them onto others. But and oftentimes we think that about ourselves, and yet we're still caught up in our trauma wounds, and we all like to justify our actions. That seems to be hardwired into human nature, and certainly into the human ego, is to always defend its own position, no matter what. which is why they say that it's why they say that pride is the gravest sin of all. Pridefulness is the seventh sin and the greatest sin. And that's even in the scriptures. They describe pride and pridefulness as being the greatest sin of all. Why? Because it was pride that caused Lucifer or Satan to, to fall from grace, to, turn his back on God and say, well, fuck you. I can cleave another reality. I don't need you standing over me, So that's the story of pride, and certainly the way it plays out in human relations. I know that many, many years ago, I lost the greatest friend that I ever had, that I can't say ever had, but certainly was my biggest friend at the time. And that friend, who I was in love with, when I say in love, I mean in the platonic sense, with a male, loved him. He was a fashion photographer and he was my hero, and I loved him so much. And we were friends for a couple of years, intense friendship. And to the extent that I was with him 5-6 days a week. And in the evenings, we played backgammon, and I just loved him to death. So inspired by him. And one day out of the blue, the friendship was terminated, and it absolutely broke my human heart, And it turned out that he thought something had happened that hadn't happened. And I later understood what it was, but he projected it onto me. And it was an unresolved grievance. It was a small grievance that was projected and had absolutely no foundation in reality. But that grievance, that perceived grievance, I call it the perceived grievance syndrome. And perceived grievances seem to be the taproot of the destruction of relationships 9 out of 10 times. It's what one party perceived was a slight or an insult or a misstep on the part of the other, and I'm not fucking phoning them back after that because you thought you heard them, so they gave you a look that you misread, and that becomes enough for pridefulness to kick into the relationship. And the next thing you know, there's no longer communion, there's no longer free-flowing interaction, phoning and hanging out, and it's over. And I know what I've just said is true of everyone in your audience will relate and look at relationships and think, yeah, it was a perceived grievance. It didn't even happen. It wasn't even real. So what does that teach us about the Plato's cave? It teaches us that we fucking well better wake up and get out of the Plato's cave into the sunlight, or risk losing the most valuable things and treasures that life has to offer us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Where does things like having no expectations or no attachments, I know that relates to freedom, but if people could understand those concepts, do you think that would help with relationships?
Detachment. We're speaking about detachment.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it certainly helps, because if one has removed, again, we get into very ambiguous territory here. There's a detachment and there's disidentification. So, and they're actually the same thing. I prefer to use the term disidentification. So when we don't identify falsely with something or someone, then we're able to be in a state of detachment. It's the wrong identification that that creates an entanglement, which can become destructive and oftentimes is destructive. So yes, in simple terms, detachment is the key to. So what's the opposite then? What is the opposite of identification or attachment? Because attaching and identifying are themselves pretty ambiguous, and they don't speak to true connection. What is true connection? That's where we get into the realm of the empathic wave form. and of how empathy and telepathy and psionic connection, which is also connected to soul covenant, keys in. And that's the real quanta. So the real relationships that you have, in a sense, are wordless ones. They're ones that that you're in such a state of knowing, of connection with that individual, that there's no need to affirm or reaffirm it or circumscribe it, So yeah, in that sense, disidentification and detachment becomes integral to forging the truest relationships in this world. But there's a higher state of grace than what I'm speaking about, which is you, whoever you are or be, moving into this world and truly beginning to recognize every single broken, bleeding heart in this world as your best friend, as your mentor, as your Zen master, as your beloved. That's the true state of grace in relationship, which is the universal sense of relationship, where you can move as, I guess, the master Jesus certainly embodies as the archetype, and in a sense the Lord Buddha also embodies as an archetype, which is to love in such a universalist way that no one ever had a particular relationship, not Pontius Pilate, not Mary Magdalene, no one. The avatar, the Atman of the individual becomes so universalist that all people relate to that master in the same way. We should ultimately be orienting ourselves in this world, so, as I said, regarding all children as your children, all mothers as your mother, and becoming disentangled from the idea of human relationship, the idea that you have to conform to a particular constellation to be a successful human and have 3 children or have a family, so that you have all of that stuff. Yes or no, it's neither here nor there whether you do or don't. The point is being fully actualized as a universalist, Christed being in your life, and going forth with such a, again, universalist sense of empathic connectivity to all living beings and all living systems. That is how we should be orienting. We should be positioning ourselves into that that state of godliness, because ultimately that's where we're headed anyway. So I may be speaking prematurely for many people. What the fuck is he talking about? Christ's sake, I'm trying to describe ultimately where each of us are headed, whether we know it or not. We are all moving ultimately into this emergent field of the divine avatar, and the bodhisattva, the fully actualized and fully realized human being who does not regard any one individual as being their mother or father or brother or sister or lover, because we move beyond those attachments and those constellations. I'm speaking about the ultimate form of detachment in the temporal realm, which is the universalist avatar state of grace and of being. Ultimately, we should aim at that and for that, and live our lives in that way, because that's where we become, in a sense, omniscient in our actions and in our truth, and the things that we do, and the things that we say, and how we resonate in our being becomes such a tremendous force for good in this world.
Thank you. So a lot of people will be thinking of their New Year's resolutions. What would you suggest is the highest New Year's resolution they can aim for?
Christ, that's an easy question for me. The greatest gift you could give yourself as a New Year's resolution is to never, ever forge another New Year's resolution, and to never allow yourself to be indentured into this fucking Julian Gregorian calendric bullshit of January, February, March, April, May, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, happy birthday, happy anniversary, blah, blah, fucking blah. Just move beyond all of the codifications of time, which is such a poison to the spirit. And I mean this. This is the truest gift to self, is to step out of time. The truest gift to your children and your grandchildren would be to step out of time. How many of you have the courage to do it? Literally step out of time and stop promulgating and perpetuating these cyclical, reductive, notions of time and motion, because they are ultimately what are codifying death into your DNA and into the DNA of your grandchildren. That's linguistic wave genetics, and that's how it works. So I know it's a hateful, Scrooge-ish, miserly thing for me to say to such a loving question. I'm sorry for pissing on the parade, but I actually mean it. The best thing you could do as a New Year's resolution is to resolve to never, ever celebrate New Year again, and instead engage every living moment, not even every day, every living moment as being that New Year's resolution. And so learn to resolve and to create these resolutions every moment that you become aware, or that you become conscious of being conscious. How's that? Every moment that you become conscious of being conscious and remember your supernature, which takes focus, it takes attention. I mean, try it right now. Be conscious of being conscious. That's beginning the state of witness. That's the early stage toward the state of witness. And the state of witness leads to a state of grace, and the state of grace leads to actualized supernature, genius, which is where you can ideate, enact, embody, and manifest anything in this realm, anything in this world, because you become so unified and coherent with the Godhead, with the divine flame. That's the ultimate gift to oneself, surely. So that's my answer.
That's perfect. Thank you. I'm just, often I think, well, what are the audience thinking? And I try and, think for them. So, which of course is always a guess, but so people are saying, well, how can I step out of time when I've got to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or I've got to take my kids to school? Like, what is the practical steps for them to step out of time?
The same answer I've given every time I'm asked that question, which is just do it. So unless you do it, and until you do it respectfully, there is no answer to the question other than just do it. And you're only going to do it when you hurt enough to do it, when the mortgage and the debt and the grind and the chemical poisons and the geoengineered microclimate that you live in, and the phosphates in the soil and the fluoride in the water have poisoned you and sufficiently, and caused friends and family to drop dead from early onset cancers, and all the suffrage that comes with this toxic matrix existence. You will do it when you hurt enough in a state of consciousness. So become conscious of the fact that living in a dystopian and steeply poisoned world is not coherent, it's not intelligent, it's not godly, that slaving for the man for coin to pay Caesar in taxes, and ultimately to die in servitude and in debt to Caesar is ignoble, falls far short of your higher destiny. Know that in one perfect lucid moment in your life, and make it so. And then turn your attention and your sights toward your own creative enterprise and toward your highest dream and expectation of this world. And if you have the courage to simply do that and fixate the plasma from your pineal through attention onto that goal, that ambition, that horizon, that objective, you will meet it. The road will rise up to meet you in equal measure. But you must have the courage for one perfect moment in time to step out of time, move into a state of timelessness, which is to say, perfect relationship with self describes timelessness. Because in a state of grace or a state of relationship with self, you sure as hell don't need to look at a fucking clock to tell you what to do or when to do it, because you are now engaging in a flow of life where the elevation of art and beauty and consciousness become sacrosanct, where a return to natural resonance and a restoration of natural law and balance in and around your life become integral for your soul to function, where you begin a new noble journey in life, where you covenant something so sacred to yourself, which is to never, ever again do anything that offends your soul, least of all when it is forced upon you or foisted upon you or instructed or commanded of you by the parent corporation or by the fucking government or by the Catholic Church or by the expectations of your colleagues or your boss at work, your taskmaster, your slave master. You see, it's all connected. And either you're actualized or you're not. Either you are free and unfettered, or you are not. And the only way in which you're going to feel truly good about yourself and about your legacy is if you strike out when you need to. Obviously, you have to choose your moment. You have to choose when to do it. And you need to provision and make certain plans. But I tell you, it's not so much in the provisioning and the planning, it's in the doing. And it's the doing that is the thing that's most difficult and seemingly impossible to most people. And yet I can tell you it's not, because once you do it, everything makes sense. Everything. And it's written into universal law that when we engage the spirit of Atman, which is our supernature, when we simply engage the spirit of our own supernature, which is to say, enter into true state of prayerfulness, not with an externalized God or Jesus on a fucking cross over there on the wall, which is a grotesquerie, but communion with the Godhead, with the true God, the living God, the one living God. When we move into that true state of prayerfulness, which is to say, actualized coherence with, then everything begins to make sense. And as I said, the road rises up to meet you as it just has for that mosquito. So that's the point, is to be in that state of grace to the fullest extent that we're capable, and see how the horizon opens up for you. All of a sudden, the phone rings and things start to conspire to work and to comport with your dream, because that, my friends, is what human existence is actually all about. We are the generators of dreaming, and it is our dreams that we project through plasma into the field that become the reality. And the Babylonian priests have long known that, which is why they established the mystery cults and the secret societies and the governments by extension and the monotheistic religious apparatus. It was all, and then the mainstream media and academia. It was all about how to sequester and commandeer and contain and control and direct human kundalini or life force or a plasma attention into manifestation. And so you see, being an indentured slave, doing a job, paying your taxes and putting food on the table for the kids, that is the most ignoble existence you could possibly imagine. All you are is fodder. You are simply being harvested for your life force and having your kids mind fucked and programmed into the cyclical harvest, and your grandchildren by extension. That is ignoble. See it for what it is, and know that you, as the grandparent or as the parent, mother, father, grandmother, uncle, aunt, brother, sister, you are the one responsible. You could be the one that unlocks and changes these trauma patterns in your family, in your culture, in your entire trajectory of your civilization, wherever you be. And that's truly what we are meant to be engaged with and preoccupied with, is freeing ourselves from the luciferic, idolatrous relationship with the illusory realm and stepping into the true sovereign autonomous flame of coherence with our divine immanent role, and then moving forth freely unfettered on the surface of the earth, elevating art, beauty, and consciousness, and embodying, enacting, and manifesting patterns of perfection in this imperfect world.
Welcome to New Earth. Sacha, I'm not sure how much power I have left on my computer, because obviously I'm not plugged in, but it has gone dim, so I know I'm on battery saver. Do you have any final words around this subject of the trial of separation? And also, would you like to let us know how your New Earth Sanctuary is going and what you're doing in the world at the moment?
Well, respectfully, I'm not going to answer the first lazy question, because no, I don't want to discourse on something unless it's asked of me. But so I don't have much to say on the subject. I think I waxed on for about 20 minutes on it, but thank you for the invite. But the second part of the question is one I'm very happy to speak to. And I just today had a fantastic summit meeting with our first New Earth Sanctuary pioneers, and our full ground crew. So I can't remember how many people were on. I think we had about maybe 40 or 50 people all said on the summit. And it was a beautiful couple of hours. I've got a fantastic team here on the ground at Bacalar Laguna in Mexico, in the Yucatan, on the Riviera here, the most beautiful part of the world, the most beautiful weather, the most beautiful 57-mile long crystalline cenote-fed laguna you can imagine, surrounded by the most beautiful jungle and the electric skies. Just such a dream to be here. And very, very happy. I've got, I think, 16 or 17 folks in our ground force now. We've got a good team on the ground, and it's growing exponentially. I'm about to open the floodgates in January for the next wave of pioneers, because we've got a lot of people waiting at the door, dozens. But I'll be making some public announcements in January, because there's substantial opportunities and land holdings being made available for people who want to plug and play and come and move in. There's lots of different enterprises as well connected to the 0-point economy that we are engendering here. It's a living experiment. It's a dream come true for everyone who's involved. We believe we have a piece of paradise here, and it's moving, it's flourishing. And we'll be circumscribing the 0-point curriculum and having the first school established by the middle of the year of 2023. I expect in the third quarter to have the first iteration of the first school. Certainly spades in the ground are all happening in 2023. This last year has been a lot of master planning, a lot of designing, a lot of the fairly tedious logistical, legal, and financial stuff. And we've got through a lot of bedevilment and witchery that always plagues the front end of a noble vision as well. So that house cleaning has been done by the grace of the living God. And it's all good. It's beautiful. Very, very excited. Very excited to open up to the next wave of people who are going to want to come in next year. So we also constantly doing tours now to people flying in, wanting to plug and play. And we've got a team on the ground who then take them around to show them the land holdings, and take them on the water down the laguna to show them our beaches, and into the farmlands and the forests, and show where our honey is being made, and our very noble ambitions to become the biggest organic farm certainly in the Quintana Roo state. That's my ambition in the next 3 to 5 years. greenhousing. I'm running a little bit late on that. I was hoping by December to have some initial greenhousing up, but I pledged that by March into April we'll do that. So we're looking really in the course of 2023. We expect that by the close of 2023 we will have turned the key on creating the most perfect template for a 0-point economy, where it's really an inward-looking economy. It's one where there's a win-win-win situation going on for the owners, the landowners, the Mayan landowners, as well as the people coming in to take small plots of freehold land. We've got construction teams and builders and designers, so having a lot of fun with the bioarchitecture, how that's going to start manifesting in 2023. And a lot of people know the work that I've done in Bali at my home at the New Earth Haven, and with Juan Schloss and some of our very creative team. We built the most beautiful bioarchitectural stuff imaginable in Bali, extrapolate that by literally 1,000 times. And that's what we're doing here in Mexico. It's a big project. I'm ultimately looking for a community to grow this community to probably 2,000 or 3,000 people internally, and factoring up to 1,000, maybe even more people a day coming through within 3 years from now. I anticipate that. And when we do festivals, that will be considerably bigger in terms of visitors. But I know what we've done in Bali, and I know how to extrapolate that to here on a much bigger scale. The difference is that here is focused on residential. So we're building communities and enclaves of New Earth homes in clusters to meet all different economic models. So it's not just people who have $200,000 or $300,000 to put into a home. It's people who've got a lot less money. So we're trying to create, I'll correct myself, we're not trying to create, we are creating an economics model which invites you in at almost any level, and also in exchange for people of the world who want to come and plug and play their skills or their resources. The university, I've got Dr. Nancy Ash, the Chancellor of the New Earth University, here with me at the moment, and she's been here for almost a month. So we've been also planning the campus and the faculty for the New Earth University. Syntropic agroforestry, as I said, beekeeping, and a lot of greenhousing is integral to the model. If we can feed everyone within our community within 3 years without relying on any kind of external import of foodstuffs, that's absolutely gospel. Being able to draw up structurized water and then structurize it again using our advanced technologies, that's very much written into it. Intelligent people, conscious people know how vital and important it is to have structured water. Also bring in the innovative technologies, which I'm developing with our beautiful team of military scientists in Romania. Many people in all my audience will know about the LifePod technologies, but there are other technologies that we have, which are so-called free energy systems that we intend to plug and play here next year, 2023. So ultimately, we're developing 0-point microgrids as well. In 36 months from today, 3 years from today, I expect to have the healthiest, most flourishing micro economy anywhere on earth, in that it will be fully self-sustaining with its own energy systems, its own purification and remediation systems for air, water, soil, and for the proper growth and biocontainment of food, and the unfettered and unbridled exchange of human beings and their skills and their talents and their genius and their art. Animal sanctuaries, we're already this week looking at considerable footprints of land to acquire within the New Earth Trust, so that we can also begin sooner rather than later the animal sanctuaries and being able to help to steward and certain species that are being extincted, and also to rescue a lot of animals in this region and surrounding regions that need love and the ministrations of good humans. So there's really no end to the scope and the scale of the project and what it is that we've kicked off here. It's thundering along. Very excited, and anyone wanting to get in touch can always contact newearthhorizon.com and through the newearthhorizon.com website, or through sachastone.com. That'll springboard you through my website to the New Earth Horizon website, and send in your contact or reach out to the team and take a call with them if anyone's interested. But it's all kicking off in the new year, and we're very, very excited. So thank you. Thank you very much for the question.